Okay, welcome to Bombal Math. So in this lesson, we're going to work on factoring polynomials with a leading coefficient equal to 1. In a previous lesson, I did factoring polynomials with just a common factor. And in other lessons, I will do with a leading coefficient greater than 1. We'll do sum of difference of cubes, we'll do difference of squares, and so on. So starting off, though, we're going to work with just the leading coefficient equal to 1. I think it's a little bit easier to do. Now, factoring is an extremely important concept in mathematics, especially as you get to algebra 2, and then trig, and so on. You have to be able to factor. So there are going to be quite a number of lessons on all the different factoring techniques and types of problems that you're going to get because it's an extremely important concept in math. So let's go ahead and start with this one. And the technique that we're going to use is factoring by grouping. Now I'm also going to show you, because the leading coefficient is 1, we technically don't have to go through that whole process. But I want to show you the technique because you're going to need it in the later lessons. So I will point that out when we get to it, how you can just use the factors to get your answer. But I want to go through the complete technique. So with grouping, what we're going to do is multiply the leading coefficient, which is 1, times this constant term, which is 20, and put our little x here and put that number there, so positive 20. Then we're going to take this middle term, which is a positive 9, and that goes down here. So what we want to do is find factors of 20 so that when you multiply, you get a positive 20, and when you add them, you get a positive 9. Again, two factors that when you multiply, you get a positive 20. When you add them, you get a 9. So now you got to go through the factors of 20. You might pick it up pretty quickly, or you can just start listing all the factors. So we got 1 and 20, we got 2 and 10. See, those are not going to work because they're not going to add to 9. But then when you get to 4 and 5, that's good. 4 times 5 is 20, and then 4 plus 5 gives us 9. So I'm going to put those here in any order, doesn't make a difference. And now I'm going to drop two sets of parentheses separated by a plus. And then what I'm going to do is take this first term here, and that's going to go in that first spot, and then take this last term and put that in this spot right here. All right? So now we have these two open spots, and what we're going to do is take the two factors that we found, we're going to put them in here in any order with whatever this variable is. So I'm going to go ahead and put the positive 4x, and then we have 5x here. So now once we get to this point, what we're going to do is we want these two parentheses to eventually be the same. So we're going to look to take out a common factor out of these two so we can get the parentheses to be the same. So at this one, I could take out an x. That would leave me with x plus 4. And then here, I could take out a 5. And that would now leave me with x plus 4. So now these two parentheses are the same, so we're good. At this point, we can go ahead and group. I'm going to group those two together. That gives us x plus 5 times x plus 4. Okay? So now some students are saying, well, why do I have to go through all of this right here when I could have just taken these two factors and put them in the parentheses with the x and I would be finished? And that is true. That will work if the leading coefficient is 1. But again, this technique of grouping we're going to use when we are factoring polynomials when the leading coefficient is greater than 1, and you're going to have to go through this technique. Once you're proficient with factoring and you recognize, oh, my leading coefficient is 1, I could just take these coefficients, right, these factors, and put them in here, and I'm finished. And that's fine. But only when you recognize that and you're proficient in factoring. Also, what I want you to recognize, if you look at these expressions here, they're all equal. If I take this and simplify it, I'm going to get this right here. If I take this and simplify it, I'm going to get this and this. And then your final simplified or factored problem right here, if you multiply this out, you're going to get your original polynomial. Students will say, well, how come you have 2x plus 4s here and only 1 here? Remember that when you multiply polynomials, especially two binomials, you multiply its distributive property. So it would be x times x plus 4. Well, I have that right here. Then it's going to be 5 times x plus 4, and I have that here. So they're equivalent. So just be careful about that because some students will want to put the x plus 5 and then they'll put 2 of these, which of course is not correct. All right, so let's look at the second one here. We're going to go ahead and multiply leading coefficient times this constant term. and that's going to be negative 30. And then we're trying to get that middle term right here, which is a positive 1. So now we want to multiply two factors that give us a negative 30, and then when we add them, are going to give us a positive 1. So you could start listing the factors of 30, and you're going to recognize pretty quickly that you're never going to get a 1 when you add these together because the numbers are too far apart. So you want to try to find two factors that are pretty close. And as you go through, hopefully you recognize 5 and 6 will work. Now what you got to figure out is which one's positive and which one is negative. Because remember, we got to multiply these to get a negative 30, so one of these numbers has to be negative. But when we add them, we need to get a positive 1. So that means we're going to have to make this smaller number the negative, which is the 5. So if you multiply these two together, you get negative 30. If you add them, you get positive 1 right here. So now we can drop our two parentheses separated by a plus, and we can put our first term in here and our last term in here. Oh, and I forgot to put these up here. And then we're going to take our two factors in any order and put them in here with whatever this variable is. So I'll go ahead and put the minus 5x here, and I'll put the 6x in here. So now again, at this point, we want to take out a common factor from both of these. So we want to take something out of here and take something out of here so we get those parentheses to be the same. Well, I can take out an x here. That leaves me with x minus 5. And then I could take out a 6 here, which will leave me with x minus 5. So now these two are the same, so we're good. Now we can go ahead and group, and that would give us x plus 6 times x minus 5. And of course, you can go ahead and multiply this out and make sure that you get x squared plus x minus 30. It's a good way to check if you have time, which of course that does work. All right, so looking at number 3 right here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go ahead and multiply. So 1 times 14 gives us 14, and then we're trying to get a negative 9 in the middle. So factors of 14, and then that will add to negative 9, and of course multiply to 14. So you can start listing them out. You got 1 and 14, and then you got 2 and 7. Now remember that if you're going to multiply two numbers to get a positive number, but then you're going to add them to get a negative, they both have to be minus, because the only way you're going to get a positive number is either positive times a positive or negative times a negative. Well, if we need two numbers to add to a negative and multiply to a positive, they both have to be negative. And I mean, you can play around with that if you're not 100% sure. If you just made, let's say, this number negative, you know that's going to be a negative number. That's not going to work. Okay, well then you make them both negative. You say, okay, that works, and then I get the negative 9. So it's fine. Sometimes it's a trial and error when you're trying to figure out the signs for some students, and that's okay. So let's go ahead and drop down our two parentheses separated by a plus. We're going to drop this term in here, the first one, and then the last one right here. And then we're trying to get these two. Keep getting put that in there. I'm going to take these two factors and put them in here with whatever variable is in the middle. And again, the order doesn't make a difference. So I'll actually switch it up. I'll put the minus 7x in here, and I'll put the minus 2x in here. You'll see you get the same answer either way. So at this point, I could take out an x. That'll leave me with x minus 7. Now, if I want to get an x minus 7 out of here, if I just took out a 2, that would leave me with negative x plus 7. And that's not going to work. I need an x minus 7. So I have to take out a negative 2, which would then leave me with an x minus 7. So now I can go ahead and group these together and get x minus 2 times x minus 7. And again, you can multiply this to see if you get that polynomial up there, which you do, it works. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed this lesson. There'll be more lessons to come on factoring because we got quite a number of problems to do. And you can check that out on my YouTube channel at Untitled Math. And like my first period students used to say, make smart choices. See you next time.